I never thought my father-in-law would destroy my life at my own husband's funeral. While everyone cried around the casket, he whispered words that made my blood run cold. "I've always loved you, Rebecca. Now that my son is gone, we can finally be together." I froze. Was this grief talking, or had he been hiding this sick obsession for years? My name is Rebecca Torres, and I'm a 34-year-old elementary school teacher. I've been married to David for 8 years, and we always had Sunday dinners with his parents. The funeral whisper, I stood at David's casket, unable to believe he was really gone. The polished wood gleamed under the funeral home lights, and I could see my reflection in it, pale, hollow-eyed, like a ghost of myself. David's face looked peaceful, almost like he was sleeping. But he wasn't sleeping. He was dead, gone, and I was left here alone. My father-in-law, Robert, stood beside me, his arm wrapped around my shoulders. At first, I thought he was just being supportive. David's mother, Linda, was on my other side, sobbing into a tissue. The room smelled like lilies and sadness. People whispered behind us, talking about how sudden it was, how tragic. A car accident. One moment David was driving home from work, the next moment he was gone. Robert's hand squeezed my shoulder, then moved down to hold my hand. His grip was too tight, almost painful. I tried to pull away gently, but he held on. I glanced at him, confused. His eyes weren't on David, they were on me, staring at me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. He leaned close to my ear. For a second, I thought he was going to say something comforting, something about David being in a better place. Instead, his breath was hot against my neck as he whispered, "I've always loved you, Rebecca. Now that my son is gone, we can finally be together." I jerked away from him so fast that Linda looked up at me, startled. Everyone was watching us. The entire funeral home seemed to go silent. My heart was pounding in my chest like it was trying to escape. Did he really just say that? At his own son's funeral? Robert's face was calm, almost gentle, like he'd just told me something romantic instead of something horrifying. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. Linda touched my arm, asking if I was okay. I nodded, even though I wasn't, even though nothing would ever be okay again. I pretended I didn't hear him. I turned back to the casket and stared at David's peaceful face. But my hands were shaking so badly that I had to clasp them together. Behind me, I could feel Robert's eyes still on me, burning into my back, the gifts. Start arriving. 2 days after the funeral, flowers arrived at my door. A massive bouquet of red roses, the kind you see in romantic movies. There was no card, no name, nothing to tell me who sent them. But I knew. Deep down, I knew they were from Robert. I left them on the porch until they wilted and died. I couldn't bring myself to bring them inside. Every time I looked at them, I felt sick. Then the next day, a bottle of expensive wine appeared on my doorstep. Not just any wine, a vintage Bordeaux that cost more than I made in a week of teaching. Again, no card. I poured it down the sink and threw the bottle in the trash. The gifts kept coming. A bracelet arrived in a small velvet box. It was beautiful, delicate gold with tiny diamonds. I'd mentioned wanting something like it years ago at a family dinner. I couldn't even remember the conversation, but apparently Robert did. He remembered everything about me. I wanted to throw it away, but something stopped me. Evidence, I thought. Maybe I'd need evidence someday to prove what he was doing. So I tucked the box into my drawer and tried to forget about it. My mother-in-law, Linda, called that afternoon. "Rebecca, honey, how are you holding up?" Her voice was thick with grief. She'd lost her son. I couldn't imagine that pain. "I'm okay," I lied. "Just taking it one day at a time." Good. That's all you can do. Listen. If you need anything at all, you let us know. Robert and I are here for you. You're still family. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to scream into the phone that her husband was sending me gifts, that he'd said something horrible at the funeral. But how could I? She was grieving. She'd just buried her only child. How could I add to her pain by telling her that her husband was obsessed with me? "Thank you, Linda. That means a lot," I said instead. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and cried. I cried for David. I cried for the life we'd planned together. And I cried because I felt so completely alone. The one person I could have talked to about this was dead, and the person tormenting me was his own father. Bowie shows up unannounced. Saturday morning, I was still in my pajamas, drinking coffee and trying to grade papers. Teaching had been my escape this week. My students were sweet and innocent, and being around them made me feel almost normal again. Almost. A knock at the door made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw Robert standing on my porch, holding 2 bags of groceries. My stomach dropped. I considered not answering, but my car was in the driveway. He knew I was home. Slowly, I opened the door. "Robert, what are you doing here?" He smiled, that same gentle smile from the funeral. "Linda sent me to check on you. She's worried you're not eating properly." He held up the bags. "I brought some things to stock your fridge." I didn't believe him for a second. Linda would have called first. She would have asked if I needed anything. This was Robert's idea, not hers. But I stepped aside and let him in. What else could I do? He was my father-in-law. He was supposed to be someone I could trust. He walked straight to my kitchen like he owned the place, setting the bags on the counter and starting to unpack them. Milk, bread, eggs, fresh vegetables, normal grocery items. But watching him move through my house made my skin crawl. "You really didn't have to do this," I said, staying in the doorway. "Of course I did. Your family, Rebecca." He put the milk in my fridge, then turned to look at me. His eyes traveled down my body, and I suddenly felt exposed in my thin pajamas. I crossed my arms over my chest. "Let me make you some breakfast," he said. "You're too thin. David wouldn't want you wasting away." The mention of David's name from his mouth made me angry. "I'm fine, Robert. Thank you for the groceries, but I really need to get back to grading papers." He ignored me and started pulling out a pan. Before I knew it, he was cooking eggs and bacon in my kitchen. The smell made me nauseous. When he finally finished, he sat too close to me on the couch, his thigh pressing against mine. He handed me a plate of food I didn't want. Then he put his hand on my knee. "Rebecca," he said softly, "I know you're grieving. I'm grieving too. We could help each other through this." I stood up so fast the plate almost fell. "Robert, you need to leave, now." His smile disappeared. His face went cold, hard. For a moment, I saw something dark flash in his eyes. Then he stood up slowly, towering over me. "I'm just trying to help," he said, his voice flat. "I don't need your help. Please go." He stared at me for a long moment, then finally walked to the door. Before he left, he turned back. "You'll change your mind, Rebecca. When you're ready, I'll be waiting." The door closed, and I locked it behind him, my whole body shaking. The photo I found, I couldn't stop thinking about Robert's visit. The way he looked at me, the way he touched me, I felt dirty, violated, and angry. So angry that David wasn't here to protect me from his own father. I needed to do something, anything, to feel in control again. So I started cleaning. I went through every room, scrubbing and organizing like a madwoman. When I got to the bedroom, I pulled out David's old boxes from the closet. Boxes I'd been avoiding since he died. Inside were memories, photos from our wedding, ticket stubs from movies we'd seen, birthday cards I'd given him over the years. Each item made me cry, but I kept going. I needed to feel close to him again. At the bottom of one box, I found a photo that confused me. It was from our wedding day. I was smiling at the camera in my white dress, looking so happy and young. But someone had drawn a red heart around my face. Not David's handwriting. I'd know his writing anywhere. I flipped the photo over. Written on the back in neat, precise letters, "My perfect girl." My hands started shaking. I knew that handwriting. I'd seen it on birthday cards and Christmas presents for years. Robert's handwriting. The room started spinning. I sat down hard on the floor, still clutching the photo. He'd written this. He'd kept a photo of me from my wedding day, the day I married his son, and drawn a heart around my face. He'd called me his perfect girl. How long? How long had he been obsessed with me? Since the wedding? Since before? I thought back to all those Sunday dinners, all those family holidays. Had he been watching me the whole time, thinking these sick thoughts while I laughed and talked with Linda, while David sat right there? My stomach turned. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. I knelt on the cold tile floor, heaving until there was nothing left. Then I just sat there, crying. I realized he'd been obsessed with me since before I even married David. Maybe that's why he'd always been so nice to me, so attentive. I thought he was just a good father-in-law. But he'd been planning this, waiting for his chance. And now that David was dead, he thought he could finally have me. My stomach turned again, thinking about all those family dinners, all those times Robert had hugged me goodbye, all those moments I'd thought were innocent. They weren't innocent. Nothing had been innocent. Linda calls with strange questions. The next day, Linda called. I almost didn't answer. How could I talk to her normally after what I'd discovered? But she was still my mother-in-law. She was still grieving. I couldn't ignore her. Rebecca, honey, I need to ask you something. Her voice sounded strained, worried. Of course. What is it? Has Robert been bothering you lately? My heart stopped. Did she know? Had she figured it out? What do you mean? I asked carefully. He's been acting strange since David died, staying out late, making excuses. Yesterday he went out for 3 hours and wouldn't tell me where he'd been. I wondered if he'd been coming to check on you. You know how he is, always wanting to help. So she didn't know. She thought he was just being a concerned father-in-law. I could tell her right now. I could tell her everything, the whisper at the funeral, the gifts, the visit, the photo. But before I could speak, she started crying. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I shouldn't be bothering you with this. You're dealing with your own grief. It's just, losing David has been so hard. I don't know what I'd do if I lost Robert too. He's all I have left. The guilt hit me like a punch to the gut. She'd just lost her son, her only child, and now she was worried about her marriage. How could I tell her that her husband was obsessed with her dead son's wife? It would destroy her. Robert's probably just processing his grief in his own way, I said, the words tasting like lies in my mouth. Everyone handles loss differently. You're probably right. He did love David so much. We both did, she paused. He keeps saying David would want him to take care of you. Maybe that's why he's been so insistent about checking on you. My blood ran cold. So he had been coming by. She just didn't know how often or why. Linda, I'm okay, really. You don't need to worry about me. Focus on taking care of yourself. Thank you, dear. You're such a sweet girl. David was so lucky to have you. After we hung up, I felt sick with guilt. I should have told her. But every time I tried to imagine saying the words, I saw her face crumbling, saw her losing the last bit of stability she had left. I couldn't do it. Not yet. Maybe I was being a coward, but I hung up feeling guilty for even thinking about telling her, for even considering adding to her pain. The late-night visit. I thought Robert would back off after I'd kicked him out. I was wrong. At 11 o'clock at night, someone knocked on my door. Hard, insistent knocking that made my heart race. I looked through the peephole, and there he was, Robert, standing on my porch in the dark. Rebecca, please. My car broke down just up the street. I need to use your phone. I didn't believe him for a second. But what if it was true? What if I didn't let him in and something happened? I'd never forgive myself. So I opened the door, just a crack. You can use the phone, but then you need to go. He nodded, looking relieved and grateful. I let him in, handing him my phone. He called a tow truck, speaking in low tones. When he hung up, he handed the phone back to me. They said it'll be about an hour. Would it be okay if I waited inside? It's cold out there. I wanted to say no. Every instinct told me to get him out of my house. But he was looking at me with such sad, tired eyes. He was David's father. I couldn't just make him wait outside in the cold. Fine, but just until the tow truck comes. He sat on my couch, and I sat in the chair across from him, as far away as possible. But then he spotted a bottle of wine on my counter, one I'd bought for myself, trying to cope with the loneliness. Mind if we open that? I could use a drink. It's been a hard few weeks. Before I could answer, he was opening it, pouring 2 glasses. He handed one to me and sat back down, this time slightly closer than before. He started talking about David's childhood, sweet stories about when David was little, about his first day of school, his first bike ride, stories that made me smile despite everything. For a moment, I almost forgot why I was afraid of him. Then his tone changed. David was a good son, he said, staring into his wine glass. But he didn't appreciate what he had. He didn't appreciate you. I stiffened. That's not true. David loved me. Did he? Robert looked at me, his eyes intense. Did he really see you, Rebecca? Because I see you. I've always seen you. My mouth went dry. Robert, don't. David never deserved you, Rebecca. I would have treated you better. I would have worshipped you the way you deserve. I stood up, my whole body shaking. You need to leave right now. I don't care about the tow truck. Get out of my house. He stood too, moving closer. Rebecca, please, just listen. Get out! I screamed, loud enough that I hoped my neighbors would hear. He stared at me for a long moment, then finally walked to the door. "You'll see," he said quietly. "You'll see that I'm right." Chapter 7. I find his shrine. After Robert left, I couldn't sleep. I paced my house, jumping at every sound. Around 3 in the morning, I noticed something on my kitchen counter. Robert's phone. He'd left it behind when I kicked him out. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was an invasion of privacy, but I also knew that phone might have answers. So I picked it up. It wasn't locked. The screen opened right up to his photo gallery. My stomach turned before I even scrolled down. The first photos were normal, family pictures, photos of Linda, random shots. But then I saw my name. A folder labeled simply Rebecca. My hands shook as I opened it. There were hundreds of photos, maybe thousands. Photos from family gatherings, zoomed in on just my face. Photos of me laughing, eating, talking. Photos where David had been cropped out, leaving just me. But the worst ones were recent. Photos of me through my classroom window at school. Photos of me grocery shopping. Photos of me walking to my car, getting my mail, sitting in my living room through my front window. He'd been following me, watching me, for how long? Months? Years? I scrolled through the dates. Some photos were from last week. Some were from years ago. There was even one from before David and I got engaged, from a barbecue at their house. I was 26 in that photo, young and smiling, and Robert had zoomed in on my face, saving it in his secret folder. I ran to the bathroom and threw up in the sink. My whole body was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I threw up again, heaving until there was nothing left. This wasn't just a crush. This wasn't grief making him act strange. This was obsession. This was years of stalking, of watching, of waiting. And David never knew. He never suspected that his own father was obsessed with his wife. I felt betrayed by Robert, but I also felt angry at David for leaving me alone with this monster. I sank to the bathroom floor, still clutching Robert's phone. I had evidence now. Proof that he'd been stalking me. But what was I supposed to do with it? Linda discovers the truth. I couldn't keep this secret anymore. Linda needed to know what her husband really was. She deserved to know the truth. The next morning, I drove to Linda and Robert's house, the phone clutched in my hand. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out, but I had to do this. For Linda, for myself, for David. Linda answered the door in her bathrobe, her hair messy from sleep. She looked surprised to see me. "Rebecca? Honey, what's wrong?" "It's 7 in the morning. I need to show you something. It's about Robert." Her face went pale. She stepped aside and let me in. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where we'd had so many Sunday dinners. I set Robert's phone on the surface between us. "He left this at my house last night," I said. My voice was shaking. "Linda, I need you to look at something, but I'm warning you, it's bad." "What is it?" She looked scared. I opened the phone and pulled up the folder. Then I handed it to her and watched her face as she scrolled through the photos. I watched the confusion turn to shock, then horror, then something that looked like she might be sick. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, Rebecca, how long? When did this?" "I don't know. Some of these are from years ago. He's been following me. Taking pictures through my windows. Linda, I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you." She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "At the funeral? He said something to you at the funeral, didn't he? I saw you pull away from him. I thought you were just overwhelmed with grief." I nodded, the tears starting again. "He told me he loved me. That now that David was gone, we could be together." Linda's face went white. She stood up so fast her chair fell over. For a moment I thought she was going to run, but instead she collapsed into a different chair, her whole body shaking. "I knew something was wrong," she whispered, staring at the phone. "All these years, I knew, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself he just cared about you, like a daughter." "Linda, he asked for a divorce." She looked up at me, her eyes red. "The day after the funeral, he asked for a divorce, said he'd been unhappy for years. I thought it was grief talking. I thought he just needed time, but it was you. He wanted to be free to pursue you." I felt sick all over again. While I'd been grieving my husband, Robert had been planning his future with me. While Linda had been crying for her dead son, her husband had been asking for a divorce, so he could be with their son's widow. "I'm so sorry," I said. "I should have told you sooner." "No." Linda grabbed my hand. "No, this isn't your fault. None of this is your fault. He's sick, Rebecca. He's sick and we need to stop him. The restraining order. Linda and I went to the police station together the next morning. She'd barely slept, and neither had I. We'd stayed up late, going through Robert's phone, documenting everything. The photos, the timestamps, the locations. We built a case. The officer at the desk looked bored until we showed him the phone. Then his expression changed. He called over a detective, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes. "This is stalking," the detective said, scrolling through the photos. "And harassment. How long has this been going on?" "Years," I said. "But I only found out a few days ago." "Has he ever threatened you? Touched you inappropriately?" I told her everything. The whisper at the funeral, the gifts, the uninvited visits, the hand on my knee, the late-night appearance. Linda sat beside me the whole time, holding my hand. "You need a restraining order," the detective said. "And Mrs. Torres, Linda, you should consider filing for divorce with these as evidence. This level of obsession, it's not safe." Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm already planning to. I can't stay married to someone who would do this." We filed for the restraining order that afternoon. The hearing was scheduled for the next day. I barely slept that night, terrified of what would happen. The courthouse was cold and sterile. Linda and I sat together, waiting for our case to be called. I'd asked her not to come. This wasn't her fight, but she insisted. "He's my husband," she'd said. "This is my responsibility too." When Robert walked in, my entire body went rigid. He looked calm, almost confident, like he thought this was all a misunderstanding that he could smooth over. Then he saw Linda sitting beside me, and his face changed. "Linda, what are you doing here?" She didn't answer. She just stared straight ahead. The hearing was quick. The detective presented the evidence, the photos, my testimony, the timeline of events. Robert tried to defend himself, saying he was just concerned about me, that I was misinterpreting his actions. Then the judge asked to see the phone. She scrolled through the photos in silence, her expression getting colder with each swipe. "Mr. Torres," she said, "this is one of the clearest cases of stalking I've seen. The restraining order is granted immediately. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Ms. Rebecca Torres at all times. You are not to contact her, directly or indirectly. You are not to go to her home, her workplace, or any location you know she frequents. Do you understand?" Robert's face went red. "This is ridiculous. She's my daughter-in-law. I have a right." "You have no rights here, Mr. Torres." The judge's voice was ice. "And if you violate this order, you will be arrested. Do I make myself clear?" As we left the courthouse, Robert was waiting outside. He saw us and started walking toward us, fast and angry. Linda squeezed my hand. "You're destroying this family," he screamed. "Rebecca, you're destroying everything. I loved you. I would have given you everything." Two police officers grabbed him before he could get close. They pulled him back, warning him he was already violating the order. As they led him away, he kept screaming my name. Linda and I walked to our cars in silence. When we reached hers, she turned to me. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry I brought him into your life." "You didn't know," I said. Neither of us knew. Going forward without them, Linda filed for divorce the next week. The evidence from Robert's phone made it quick and brutal. She got the house, most of their savings, and her freedom. Robert didn't fight it. I think he knew he'd lost everything. She moved in with her sister across town, away from the memories, away from the house where she'd raised David. Sometimes she called me and we'd talk about David, about the good times before everything fell apart. She apologized constantly for not seeing the signs earlier, for bringing Robert into my life through marriage. "You couldn't have known," I told her every time. Neither of us could have. But the truth was, I was angry. Angry at Robert, obviously, but also angry at David for dying and leaving me alone with his father. Angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. Angry at the world for being so cruel. I started therapy. My therapist was a gentle woman named Dr. Chen, who specialized in trauma. She helped me understand that what Robert had done wasn't my fault, that being kind and friendly to my father-in-law didn't mean I'd somehow encouraged him, that his obsession was his sickness, not my responsibility. Slowly, I started to heal. I went back to teaching. My students were my joy, my reminder that there was still innocence and goodness in the world. I threw myself into work, creating elaborate lesson plans, staying late to help struggling kids. My principal noticed and recommended me for a position at a school in another state, a better school with better pay. 6 months after the restraining order, I accepted the job. It was time for a fresh start, away from the memories, away from the fear of running into Robert somewhere, away from the ghost of David that haunted every corner of this town. Before I left, Linda came to say goodbye. She brought a photo album, pictures of David as a child, as a teenager, as the man I'd married, pictures of us together, laughing and happy. "I want you to have these," she said. "I want you to remember the good times. Remember the David we loved, not what his father became." We cried together on my empty living room floor, surrounded by moving boxes. She hugged me tight, and I realized she'd lost so much more than I had. She'd lost her son and her husband. Her entire family had imploded. "You deserve a fresh start, Rebecca," she said. "You deserve happiness. Don't let what Robert did steal your whole life from you. David would want you to be happy." As I drove away from that town, my car packed with everything I owned, I thought about David, about the life we'd planned together, about the family I'd thought I had, but I also thought about the future, about the new job, the new town, the new life waiting for me. Robert had tried to take everything from me, my sense of safety, my family, my home, but he hadn't won. I was still here, I was still standing, and that was the real revenge. Living, moving forward, refusing to let his sickness destroy me. In my rearview mirror, I watched the town disappear. Somewhere behind me, Robert was alone with his obsession, his destroyed marriage, his ruined life. And I was driving towards something new. I'd learned that family isn't always who you're born to or who you marry into. Sometimes family betrays you in the worst possible ways. Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protection from. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could survive betrayal and come out the other side, that I deserved to be safe, to be respected, to live without fear. As the sun set behind me, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I smiled. For the first time since David died, I felt hope, and that was enough.